All right, welcome to I Didn't Know You Could Do That with Inspec. I'm Clinton Wolf. I'm an engineering manager with Progress Chef Software, and I lead the Inspec team. So my team helps develop Inspec, and we create all the great new features that are in Inspec. So we work with Inspec every day, but most of you probably work with only Inspec Exec, which is the command that lets you execute a compliance profile. But Inspec is so much more than Inspec Exec. In fact, in Inspec 6, there are 22 top-level commands in Inspec 6. But when do you use which command? There's so much more to Inspec than just Inspec Exec. There's Inspec Archive, Inspec Check, Inspec Shell, Inspec Detect, Inspec Suggest, Inspec Parallel, so many different commands. So today we're going to learn all the different things that you can do with Inspec. We're going to explore and diagnose things. We're going to deal with large profiles. We're going to integrate with other systems, and we're going to learn how to work more efficiently. First, we're going to explore and diagnose with the 4 commands shell, detect, check, and export. First, let's learn about Inspec Shell. Inspec Shell allows you to interactively type in and execute Inspec language. Along with documentation, it's the best tool for learning about new resources. You can run against remote targets using the -T option. So Inspec Shell is a great way to learn about Inspec. You can type Inspec commands directly into Inspec Shell and find out exactly what they do. So if you just run Inspec Shell against your machine, you'll be presented with a prompt telling you exactly what it's detected. On my machine, it detected Mac OS, which tells me it's in the Darwin BSD family. It tells me what kernel version it detected, and tells me what architecture that it's on. And then right here, right at the prompt, I can type in Inspec language. I can type in describe file /temp do it should exist. And right there, I get an Inspec response. It executes the profile and executes the resource and tells me exactly the result right there in real time. So you can execute this, just any Inspec resource you can execute and have the real-time result right there as you are typing it in. Inspec Shell is a great way to learn about resources, and you can execute it directly on remote shells as well, so that you can learn exactly how resources behave on remote hosts. All right, so now let's talk about Inspec Detect. Inspec Detect is a great way to diagnose connection issues. So if you're trying to connect to a remote machine, you may have found that there's some problem, or you may be trying to use a target matcher or a platform matcher to match a profile to a target machine, and you're wondering exactly what the target machine's family is. Inspec Detect is a great way to find out this information. You can even run it with log level debug for even more diagnostics. All right, so let's try that. So if I run it locally, we'll get just the information about my local machine, which should tell me that it's a Mac OS system. It does. Or I can run it remotely. On here, we'll run it on a Vagrant machine that I have set up running. So now this is going to connect to a a virtual machine that I have running on my local machine, and it's going to tell us exactly what it found. It found that it's an Ubuntu machine, the x86-64 architecture. So that's Inspec Detect for you. And if we wanted to run it with even more debugging information, we can. This should give us all kinds of information about the SSH connection. It does. Yep. So it gave us a bunch of information about the SSH connection. There we go. So that is Inspec Detect. So Inspec Check lets you look for problems with profiles. Inspec Check detects problems like required fields being missing in both the profile code as well as in the Inspec YAML metadata file. It also includes basic support for linting with more rules coming in the future. Let's have a look at Inspec Check. All right, so to run Inspec Check, you just run Inspec Check, and then the name of your profile. And it will examine the profile and run all of its checks and warnings. And here we go. It looks like we got 3 warnings: missing a profile license, and it has no title, and it has no description on a control. So we got 3 warnings and no offenses. So that's Inspec Check. It'll do these checks for you. Every time you upload a profile to automate, Inspec Check is run for you. It's also run for you whenever you run Inspec Archive as well. So Inspec Check is used all the time to look for problems in profiles, and it's a great way to look for issues in your profiles. Inspec 6 has introduced a new feature called IAF files, which are signed binary profiles. That's a great feature, but it introduces a new problem, which is being able to see inside the profile so that you're able to identify controls to use with waivers, overriding controls, and selecting things using tags. Well, that's why we have the export command. Inspec Export allows you to see everything, including the metadata and controls. So let's have a look at the export command. As you can see here in this file, I have a IAF file. And if you just try to look at an IAF file, you'll see that it's a binary file. And it says Inspec Profile Type 2. And it says use Inspec Export to view this file. And then the remainder of the file is binary. So let's try that. Let's use my profile, or let's use Inspec Export to view my profile. .iaf. All right, what do we get out of that? We get a whole bunch of stuff. It looks like it's in YAML. We get a bunch of metadata information, and then we have a control section here. We have one control. We have the control source code. Very good. We have the control ID right there. So we have the full control source code in YAML format, which is enough for us to be able to go in and find things like tags. It has no tags. We were able to find out that it has a description. We're able to find out its impact. We're able to find out its control ID for use with waivers and attestations. So we're able to find out everything we need to find out. So that's great. All right, so now let's talk about how to deal with large profiles. So when you have a large profile, you want to be able to work with it effectively. You want to be able to deal with the fact that it's large and yet still be able to effectively see progress from the profile. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the progress bar output. So you can use the progress bar reporter to see real-time progress. A reporter is a configurable output stream for Inspec Exec. The progress bar reporter provides real-time feedback, so you can see which controls are slow, letting you focus your optimization effort. So that what happens is, as every control is executed, you see the name of the control that was just executed. And you also see a progress bar going across the bottom of the screen. So it's very obvious which controls are slow. So it allows you to focus your efforts more easily on identifying which controls are slow. So let's have a look at the progress bar. Here I've got a profile. This is a very big profile. It takes a long time to load and run. So let's try running it. And we're going to run it with the progress bar reporter. All right, so it's going to take a little bit of time to compile this large profile. And then once it's compiled, it's going to start issuing forth progress updates directly to the screen. So it will show the name of the control that's being executed, and it'll show that in color to show whether or not it passed, failed, or skipped. And it will also show a progress bar at the bottom of the screen, moving from left to right, showing as we gain progress. So as you can see, we've got these pass and fails going by. Those are the controls that are passing and fails. And we've got this progress bar at the bottom of the screen. A progress bar at the bottom of the screen showing exactly how far along we are. So normally, if you just use the CLI, if you don't specify the progress bar reporter, you just get the CLI reporter, which waits until the very end of the entire execution to show you any results at all. So the progress bar reporter is much more useful. As you can see, we're able to identify which controls are slow and which ones are fast. We're able to see exactly where we are in the progress of the profile running, and it gives us real-time results, which is great. All right, focus on specific controls with Inspec Exec -- controls. So this executes only the specific controls by ID. You can use a pattern to match multiple controls, and you can use this to divide a profile into multiple pieces. So I'll show this off using this profile. All right, for example, this profile has a number of controls that are all named with the word rule in it, followed by a number. So we're going to split this up so that we only run the controls whose name begin with the word rule 1 in it. So let's run that. So this will only match controls that match the word rule _1. Perhaps I should have run it with the progress bar. Let's run that with the progress bar so it'll be faster. There we go. All right, now as we wait for that to spin up, we should see just rules that only match the rule 1. Yes, we only see rule 1 rules match this time, as previously we saw many rules that matched. So it only ran 6 out of the 72 rules. So this time we could run it again, but run it with only rule 2. So you could split up the running of your large profiles based on some text that matches in the rule ID. In this case, we're using the string rule 1, rule 2, rule 3, for example. So this is one way to divide a large profile. There we go. All right, Similar idea, using a profile to divide a profile in custom ways using inputs. So here the idea is that you could use an input to match an instance pattern, an instance ID pattern, and then use that instance ID pattern to restrict which instances you match. So this you'd be using a resource to query all to be querying all EC2 instances that match a certain pattern that you provide. This allows you to externally provide the pattern outside of your profile, so then you can vary this pattern over time, so that first you do all of them that begin with the letter 1, then the letter 2, then the letter 3, and that sort of thing, so that you can divide things up. I won't go into detail as to the actual running of this one, but as you can see, this you would use the input pattern -1 filter, and that causes it to match only EC2 instances that begin with the letter 0, 1. This allows you to shard your profiles based on some criteria such as a resource ID. Some of our customers have used this to shard estates that have millions of individual cloud resources. All right, next up, integration with other systems. Multiple output, JUnit output, the exit codes, and the archive command. So let's talk about integration with other systems. Multiple output, using multiple reporters to get several copies of output. So a reporter is a configurable output stream for Inspec Exec. You can send output to multiple destinations and formats simultaneously. There's many useful reporter outputs available, including command line output, which is the default. There's HTML, JSON output, which is great for machine processing, and YAML output. There's all kinds of output formats available. So you can use multiple reporters. I'll give a quick example of that. All right, so what I've told Inspec to do is to generate 2 streams of output for the profile that it's executing. First, send the output to the command line, which it has done, and then also write a file using the HTML2 reporter to write a file called myreport.html, which it has also done. It can also create JUnit files and do all sorts of other things as well. We can have YAML output. You can place any of the reporter names there and then put a colon and then put a file name, and it will write the report to a file. They're reported to the screen as well as to a file, like so. So that's multi-report output. You can have as many reporters as you like. The JUnit 2 reporter generates properly formatted JUnit XML reports. This replaces the deprecated JUnit reporter. JUnit files can be consumed by Jenkins and several other CI systems for test tracking. Let's get a quick demo of that. That's real easy to do. JUnit 2. There we go, my report.xml. So this will generate to the screen as well as to a XML file. And now if we look at the myreport.xml, we see it looks like a JUnit file, which it does. So there we are. Using the exit codes to detect outcomes, Inspec Exec exit with distinct codes depending on the test outcomes. 0 is a normal exit, all tests pass. 100 is a normal exit, but at least one test failed. 101 is a normal exit, at least one test was skipped, but none failed. So you can use these exit codes to detect outcomes and intelligently use them in your CI engine. Finally, under integration with external systems, we can create tarballs with Inspec Archive. This is great for serving from web servers or file servers. They're very portable. They include all the dependencies of the profile. Archive files can be directly executed by Inspec Exec. And Inspec Archive creates either tar.gz or zip files, depending on the operating system that's running. All right, so let's have a look. So let's run Inspec Archive on my profile. And what we should see it happen is we should see it vendor the profile, check the profile, and then create a tarball from the profile. So it vendored it. It checked the profile. And it should be creating a tarball now. Well, the warnings, the warnings come from the check, from the inspect check process, but that's fine. The actual profile was created as a tarball. There it is. And it's very large because it contains all of the Inspec AWS dependency. So that's why it's so large. At any rate, that is a tarball archive of a profile that depends on Inspec AWS, and it contains the entire dependency for you. So it's all ready to execute and all nicely self-contained. Working efficiently. So let's talk about plural resources. So a plural resource queries multiple resources of the same type. So you may find that we have not only the AWS EC2 instance, but we also have the AWS EC2 instances resource. That's called a plural resource. A plural resource queries multiple instances of the same instance type at the same time. So you can use them to query in bulk, then loop over individual resources in detail. And you can also use them to assert that something should not exist. So here's a positive assertion example at the top. We're using the plural resource. Using the plural resource to loop over all AWS S3 buckets, and we're looping over their bucket names, and then we're examining each bucket name, each bucket individually, and asking if it has default encryption enabled. So we're looping over everything, which you don't have to do. You can provide a query and narrow that down quite a bit. But we're looping over things and we're examining things in detail. That's one common use of plural resources. Another common use of plural resources is a negative assertion example, which is to provide a query that should match nothing, like this, AWS EC2 instances where the VPC ID is nil, and say that it should not exist. Typically, we also provide something that says its instance ID should be empty so that you can identify which things exist when they should not exist, so that if this test fails, you're able to identify which EC2 instances are the ones that are in violation. So that's using plural resources effectively. You can also generate code with Inspec Init. This is a great way to This is a great way to use your time effectively. Whenever you need a new profile, just generate it. Don't ever write a new profile by hand ever again. Generate it with Inspec init profile name. So let's do that real quick and see what you get. Sorry, I forgot to get rid of the old one, but bundle exec, my inspec, so inspec init profile, my profile. And what happens? You get a whole bunch of things. You get a README, you get a controls directory with some example controls, you get a metadata file, you get an empty library file, and you get everything you need for a new profile. You can do the same thing with resource. Inspec init resource works. Inspec init plugin works. It's a very, very powerful tool for you, the Inspec code generator, Inspec init. All right, finally, the last thing we'd like to talk to you about is discovering which chef profiles to apply using Inspec Suggest. The Inspec compliance library contains over 400 curated profiles, all available through Automate. Using Inspec Suggest, you can recommend a selection of those profiles. They may be used locally or on a remote target using -T. It suggests operating system and application profiles, as well as database profiles now. So let's have a look at this. This is a great feature. We're really proud of this. We think this is going to be a very exciting addition to the Inspec family. I don't think there's anything in the suggest directory, but all you have to do to run Inspec Suggest is just to say Inspec Suggest. Inspec Suggest will run locally against your machine. It will examine your machine and try to make a guess as to which Inspec profiles would be a good fit for it. And it suggests for my machine, the CIS Apple Mac OS 1015 profile, which is a very good guess because my machine is running Apple Mac OS 1015. So it suggests the CIS Apple Mac OS 1015 profile. Good suggestion. Let's try running it against something more interesting. The Vagrant VM I have running. So this time we're going to run Inspec Suggest against a remote host. So it's going to connect to something remotely, and it's going to run its examinations there and come up with a list of suggestions. And I came out with 5 suggestions. It suggests running a couple of different Apache profiles. It also suggests a Tomcat profile. Looks like Tomcat's been installed on the machine. It also has detected that it's running a different operating system, Ubuntu 18.04. It also suggests that MongoDB has been installed on the machine, and so we should run the MongoDB profile on it. So it came out with 5 suggestions for us, which is really quite a number. All right, so that's Inspec Suggest. We've really got big expectations for Inspec Suggest. We really think that's going to have a lot of impact in the world as people get used to using Inspec and they try it out and realize that they wish that they knew what profiles to run. Inspec Suggest will tell you exactly what profiles to run, and will suggest those profiles out of the Chef Compliance Library. I think it's a great way to get to know the Compliance Library. So that's it. That is some of the many things that Inspec can do for you.